Welcome to the Fearless Homeschool podcast with Macaulay, talking everything homeschooling, family, learning and life. A space where we can learn and grow together because
why do it alone?
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Fearless Homeschool podcast. And this one's a little bit different. Throughout the whole season, because we're nearly wrapping up this season, about different homeschooling styles, we have spoken a little bit about Charlotte Mason, but in particularly living books approach in a lot of different podcast episodes. So I thought, why not get Anthony Coafield from Living Book Press to jump in with us and have a chat about living books specifically. And I did have a chat with him in the Australian New Zealand Homeschooling Summit in the hopes that we could share it here on the podcast. So sit back and have a listen to Anthony and I chat about the benefits and the ease of learning with living books. All right. I would like to welcome Anthony from Living Book Press. Anthony is here to talk to us a little bit about living books, obviously, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I'm really excited to dive deeper into understanding living books for newbies and for not newbies alike, because I think it's a resource that a lot of people forget to use and don't understand the power. So welcome, Anthony.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here and discussing something that I really believe in, which is living books. I'm a homeschooling dad. My wife and I have a farm here, and we've got 3 boys that are about to turn 15, 13, and 12, I think. Jeez, they grow way too quickly. And yeah, we have always homeschooled our boys, which has been a lot of fun. And we chose living books just because I knew nothing about homeschooling when we went to start. And I did a whole pile of those quizzes online that, what's your homeschooling style? And they kept coming up with Charlotte Mason and then unschooling. And so I did a bit more research into Charlotte Mason and saw that the reason that was recommended to me is how much I loved books myself. I actually had a head injury when I was younger, and I found after that I had some memory issues, and the main things that I could remember came from books. I think there was that emotional investment, and there was so much that reinforced whatever was going on, that it managed to seep through and really stick in my memory. And so I thought that's great. What a wonderful way to be able to share knowledge with my kids and help them be able to remember it easily, rather than having them sort of memorizing something, if they can really connect with the material. And so from there, I just started using living books. And there's so many wonderful curriculums people had put out, but unfortunately, a lot of the books were old and out of print and getting ridiculously expensive if they ever did come up secondhand. And so just to pay forward the help I had, I sought the rights to a few of these books and reprinted them. And then people kept asking for more books, and I just kept going. And so I think it's almost 8 years now I've been publishing living books as well.
That's so exciting because you're right. They're sometimes not easy to find. They're sometimes quite expensive. But how did you come across the idea to get the rights? Because you've got so many on your, we'll get back to that, but on your website right now, don't you? There's such a huge library.
Yeah, I've always had a philosophy of, don't complain about something if you can do something about it. Like, there's no point just sitting around complaining that something's too expensive or you can't do whatever. It's better off spending that time looking for a solution. And I just thought, what? The main barrier to entry for people wanting to use this educational style is that it can be intimidating trying to find some of these books that people are recommending. And so I just jumped online and started scouring gravestones and obituaries and trying to find out who would be holding the rights to some of these small Australian titles, because that's where I started. And I got lucky, basically. And then one thing led to another. I had to teach myself a lot as we went along, but I figure that's a great way to set the example to our kids, that even if you don't know how to do something at the moment, let's just get in and learn what we need to learn as we go.
Yep. There's so much of that in homeschooling. As a side note, is how awesome it is that our kids are watching us learn, us have hardship, all of those things, seeing us run our businesses as part of our day-to-day life, instead of it being something that I don't see until I'm in my 20s, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think there's some of the more important lessons that we're teaching our kids each day. The sometimes to win just to get up and get clothes on and get food. And it's okay to acknowledge those seasons and to ride with that rather than destroying yourself by forcing your way through it.
Yeah.
And so it's important to show them that self-compassion and that self-care, but also the teaching yourself that you don't have to know how to do everything already. Learning isn't something that ends when you finish school or university. It's a lifelong thing. I remember when my kids were learning their alphabet, I tried to learn the Russian alphabet at the same time, just to give me that understanding that it is actually quite an abstract and weird concept, that these shapes have attached sounds that then get put together to have another abstract meaning of some word for a
Whoa.
thing. And it gave me a lot more patience when I'm like, no, that's a cur. Can you not understand? Because it's been so intuitive for us for forever. It's hard to remember that, this stuff is really difficult.
Absolutely. And I think that's where living books can come into play because you started talking about it. And I'm going to ask you to explain exactly what living books are. But
Yeah,
because you are giving information in a beautiful story or with emotional connections and people and all that sort of stuff, it is so much easier for kids to engage in it, isn't it? So could you give
e-
us a bit more of a background of living books and how what they sort of are and how they work?
absolutely. So, living books is a concept that originated from a lady named Charlotte Mason, who was an educator in England. Um, she believed that education was something that everybody deserved, and that everybody, no matter their class, was very capable of learning just as much. So England was very much sort of a class system where you had your coal miners and your workers, then you had your aristocracy and the different levels. And often it was the richer people that were believed could learn, and the younger ones, you were out working in the coal mines when you're 8. And so she believed that it was everybody was capable of learning, and she came up with this concept of living books. Now, living book is usually literary, uses good language, and doesn't talk down to kids, but it's written by an author who is really passionate about what they're writing about. So it's more they're excited to be sharing this with the reader. Um, and so, because of that, they're quite engaging, and they're often you'll remember them a lot better than a dry textbooks that's just sort of a list of facts that come out without anything tangible to connect them to. It's like you can read the facts and things about Burke and Wills or things like that, and just the quick snippets. But it resonates a whole lot more when you're reading a narrative of them, dying of thirst and searching for this stuff, and it just really drives it home so much more for our kids. Because I would rather my kids be able to remember the hardships and everything they went through than necessarily the exact date that these things happened. I think the whole purpose of learning is to understand and be able to see how these things all affect everything else. And all knowledge is sort of a web that all interacts with all these different areas. And so seeing them be able to take that part in and the real effects of all this stuff that's happened in history or in geography, the way that the geography affects life for people, rather than just memorizing the terms, having it in a story really just makes it resonate why these things matter, I guess.
Well, absolutely. That's deeper learning, isn't it? Because it's really good to know the date, but if we can't comprehend the impact, we can't hopefully learn from that and move forward.
Exactly. And that's one thing as home educators, it's so important for us to know why we're educating. Sure, there's, especially in New South Wales, there's certain things that you have to do just to check that box off. And so we do those. But knowing the purpose of what we're doing and the lesson we're actually wanting our kids to take from it, and whether it's change we want to see in their lives or just an understanding so that they approach the world differently, I think it's really important to know what our point is in what we're doing.
And obviously, I'm Victoria, so we're a little more flexible. But from what I can understand with New South Wales, I think the stress there, if we can hit that point that you've just spoken about, is that
Yeah.
they feel like when they're reporting, it actually has to be written understanding, or that's the way the evidence is going. But the fact that you've read a story to your child that actually ticks those boxes, that is learning, that is education. It can be as simple as that, and then a discussion that you document, basically. Am I correct?
And we could probably go into this. I was going to approach it later. one thing that goes hand in hand with living books is a thing called narration. And that's just the kid telling back what they've heard you say. When you're starting out, some people say, each sentence or paragraph. I like to say each idea. As you're reading things, there's certain ideas, and it might be 3 or 4 paragraphs, but each idea, just sort of stop and say, okay, so what have we read? And they'll tell you back their understanding of it. And what this does is makes them process all the information in their minds, rearrange it, and say it back in their own words. And if they get better
Yeah.
at it, you can longer and expand it. But that's been found to really reinforce the learning, and it's so much easier than you wrote going over just simple facts and stuff when you want them to remember what's been taught.
Yeah. And we're doing a little learning group at the moment, and we're not using living books, but we're using a thing called Letters from Afar, which is similar. It's a letter that's a
Yeah,
living book, basically.
yeah, that's
And
the same concept.
it yeah, the same concept. So, but from it, we're learning about Paro Bhutan at the moment. And my daughter's looking into celebrations after hearing about it. And she's drawing a picture of a celebration, like what their attire was. My son is looking into like natural disasters after listening to it. And he's making a landslide.
That's
So
it.
he's
A-
making, that's learning. He's shown that he's learned, hasn't he, from that book?
Exactly. And they've both had exactly the same thing. And what they've taken away from it is totally different. One of them is more
Yeah.
fascinated by this area, another one more. Not, it's not right or wrong. They're both right.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
both then getting to continue that and nurture the things that they're finding fascinating from it. And that's what I love about what we get to do with this. And I'll be kicked out of the purist living book club for saying this as well, but back when living book concept was created, there wasn't a lot of options. I mean, you still didn't really have your radio plays going on. Nowadays, we have things like YouTube where you've got niche creators that are just obsessed with some crazy little thing, and they create amazing videos to be able to share this knowledge that they have. You've got amazing podcasts with people that are just passionate about whatever subject it is and wanting to talk to other experts in that field and share this knowledge. There are so many other resources now other than just physical books that I think still fit into that same category of a passionate person sharing this stuff that they love.
So, with that, with the YouTube and all that sort of stuff, they are still telling stories, right? If people actually take it for what it is, we are probably on the stricter side of digital use in our family, but our kids, if they have a passion, my son loves his motorized anything really. He found some people that pull motors apart, and he's watching that and understanding because they're talking him through it. So they're still telling a story instead of it just being dot points, if that makes sense.
That's it. Exactly. Absolutely. And that's one thing that I really love about
Yeah.
what's out there nowadays, where we're in an age of so much information that I think it's hard to just choose the best. We've got an embarrassment of wealth.
And you've just hit on a point that is, I think, can be scary for people. Even in your library, when I look at it, how do I choose?
Absolutely. And that's one thing that's really tricky. I'm having to switch my mindset because I've always been a supplier. These are books that are already recommended by different curricula, and my goal was simply just to make it easy for people to find the books that they're looking for. If you can't
Mhm.
find a secondhand, beautiful old copy, no sweat. There's a good quality, affordable version that you can grab off me when you need it. But now I'm starting to find these other great books that people are suggesting that aren't part of a curriculum, and I'm having to sort of get my mind into that selling mode as opposed to just supplying and saying, "Hey, this book is really great. This is why you'll love it." And that's not natural for me at all.
Oh, because there is a few people have had discussions just from the podcast and hearing people talk about living books, and then people coming to me and saying, "Oh, that's amazing. I really understand what they're saying through that learning just happens. Literally, if you want to take it further, you can, or you can't. You don't have to. You've read a book together, you've enjoyed it, you've understood some knowledge." But they're like, so if I want to do Australia and I want to do this in Australia, how do I know what to buy? And I think that is a barrier for people because they don't want to get it wrong, but I don't think we really think that much about a story that we're using for entertainment.
And so much, if we choose quality entertainment, then our kids are going to be learning from it. And that's one thing I really love about a lot of living books is they're great stories that you enjoy reading for fun. Um, there's a series that I republished called John of the Sirius, and then there's John of Sydney Cove and John and Nanbury. And it just follows this 12-year-old boy whose dad is a member of a soldier on the First Fleet. And he's sort of a bit mischievous and runs a bit wild. So the first book is sailing from England and heading down to Tenerife, across to Rio, Cape Town, and then landing in Sydney Cove. And the second book is sort of following the start of the settlement as they're, struggling to get food and the rest of it. And then the third book is his friendship with Nanbury, who is the real character. And it just brings so much of early Australian history to life, understanding those struggles and everything they went through. And one thing I will acknowledge here is there is a lot of whitewashing. They don't really delve into the conditions for the convict. They do quite a nice job of being sympathetic to our first Australians and the disgusting treatment that was given to them. But anything you read will be choosing which parts they're wanting to promote. And so it's always important to keep that in mind. There's no perfect book for anything. But it really does bring a lot of that part of Australia to life. And then I balance that by using something like Eye of the Eagle by Ron, which talks about the farmers, poisoning the water that the first Australians were drinking from and the atrocious things that were done there, and follows these two kids trying to find another tribe basically to join after their tribe is massacred. And so it just sort of gives a bit more perspective to that other side. So that our kids can be aware that it wasn't all honky-dory.
Absolutely. But also, you've connected with characters. A lot of the time, I know they're not always, but a lot of the time they are children or teens actually telling the story as well. But I learned what you're talking about from a textbook in year 7 or 8 with read this passage, answer this question. And there was no emotional connection to it. Well, there was.
That's it.
Like, you knew that it was bad and you knew that it was not good. And but there wasn't that deep connection to a character.
It's very different reading about, the railway was going in and, this many Aboriginals were killed when they attacked because of whatever else, to reading about the kids of these first Australians that were killed and the effects it had on them trying to go find somebody. It just makes it real what has happened to people. And even though we may never completely understand, it gives you a little bit more empathy for what has happened.
Yes. And if we talk about learning and teaching for a second, because yes, it's beautiful that they're all good books, and we've sort of spoken about story helps us actually connect, stories help us remember. But in terms of learning and teaching, how do these stories tick all the boxes?
So the way that I do this when I'm doing my reporting, so when we're planning, I just jump on the website. Here in New South Wales, we have to talk about the outcomes and that kind of thing. Some people like to just put the stage statements, but at least in my area, I've been reading, they've been cracking down on that, and they want each of the individual outcomes. So I just copy and paste those into a document. And then underneath each, I write 1 or 2 lines saying, to accomplish this, we are going to read X, Y, Z, discuss, blah, blah, blah. And that's all I do, just a little bit under each one. So you're making it easy for the person who comes around to tick their boxes, basically. So if you've done that, they can think, okay, you've read the outcome, you've got a plan to achieve it. That's all they need to know. Then when it comes time to do the reporting, I go through and just delete all the things I said I was going to do and write, to do this, we read such and such a book and we discussed such and such, visited wherever. And it just makes it easy for them to tick their boxes, basically. But I just go through the curriculum. My oldest now is as 15, he's starting to choose his own subjects. And so we're working with him now to say, okay, this is the outcome. What books or what resources can we find to help you do this? And so I'll find a few different choices and I'll let him select which one, because we're trying to move him into being a bit more in control of his learning to help make that next step of learning being a lifelong thing. I think sometimes we just spoon feed our kids so much of their education, and then when that stops, it's hard for them to start to feed themselves so much. So we're making it more intentional for him to do that. And so then I get him to help us write the stage statements and the outcomes of how we're going to achieve all of these things. Our first renewal, first time we got 1 year straight away, which is the most you get usually with your first interview. And after that, we've had 2 years every single time with living books as the basis of our education. So we haven't had any troubles at all following that approach, saying which books we will use and what we hope to achieve with them.
And I think what's crucial that you said is that just because you said it when you were putting in your plan doesn't mean you can't change it if it's not working, even with living books by the end of as long as you report on what you did.
Exactly. And it is just that, a plan. And when you're planning 2 years out, things are going to change. You are going to have health issues. Maybe your kids come down with something or something else happens, and plans can change. So then at the end, yeah, you just do right what worked for you, what you did to achieve each of these things.
And if we break that down even more, because I know people were probably sitting there going, and I know you've done this because in a previous chat you let me know, so that's why I'm asking. I know people go history, geography, literacy, all of that's sweet. But how does living books help us with maths? So could you kind of talk about that for us?
So with maths, because it's such a weird abstract concept, there's some books out there like Circumference, and they get into some topics which are great. I personally love Life of Fred, which some people call twaddle, which is sort of the opposite of a living book. It's like the fairy floss. You fit a fairy floss is okay, but you don't want to have that for every meal, whereas your living books is your meat and potatoes type of thing. Some people are like, I will not let any twaddle in my home at all. Twaddle got my dyslexic son the confidence to read, so it had a purpose in that instance, and so that's great. But for me, I love Life of Fred just because it is stories. And some of these stories are ridiculous, but in their ridiculousness, it really does help drive the point home or help you remember what's going on. And it just follows this child who is somehow a maths professor. And he goes right through, they've got it from the very beginning right through to almost university level. It's a maths professor who wrote these books. I was a 4-unit maths nerd in school, and I was grinning with glee in the very first Life of Fred book as they're giving them a good introduction to algebra without them even realizing it. This stuff that I remember kids having a struggle to understand once we got into year 9 is being introduced so easily and obviously right back in the very first book. Because so much of maths, I think, is taught as these weird abstract concepts. And I mean, when you think about it, it is a very unusual. So much of it is airy fairy. 1 + 3, 1 what? There's no connection to anything physical. So that's why I love Life of Fred, because it is starting with him, 1 apple and whatever apples, and is doing whatever with them. But you've actually got these concrete things that it's using the whole time. We screamed through the first lot of books, and I actually wrote to the professor who wrote them saying, what should I do? And he said, you don't want to keep going because kids aren't ready for these next steps until they're getting into puberty. So just play blackjack with him. Just nail those number facts, do whatever else. And so that's what I did. Whenever we finished something and he had a choice what to do next, I would choose something else and we'd play blackjack to see who would get it. And so I could also teach him that the house always wins. So he learned not to do more gambling through me winning every single one of those as well, messing around as a kid. It's more difficult ones to do. There are other books I have, though, like Number Stories of Long Ago, and it has a whole pile of fun number problems in it. But it sort of traces through the history of numbers and counting back from the 1-2 lot of many years ago, and then how the different nations and cultures came up with more numbers as they needed to and why they needed to, how they recorded numbers and all the different numbering systems that we've had going through, which is really fascinating.
Oh, I was about to say, as a maths teacher, the one thing that does annoy me is that the history of maths is so interesting. So, with my applied learning kids, your kids that were disengaged or whatever they want to call them in the mainstream, we would have a different maths class for them by year 9 just to try and re-engage them. And the first thing we started was the history of maths, and they had to pick a mathematician because inevitably their lives were crazy. Like some of the stuff
Oh,
that they
yeah.
all got up to was so interesting, or the fact that they stole from each other. There is so
Uh-huh.
much in there, and we just forget that maths has that side of it as well. So the
That's it.
fact that you spoke about that, I think again it gives understanding to what they're learning and why.
Exactly. Yeah. I just published last year a biography of Euclid. And I found him fascinating. And but yeah, all these characters, Euclid, Pythagoras, all these other great minds that were sitting wrestling with these unusual concepts and making sense of the world through it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, the Euclid
I
story is
really
awesome.
enjoy maths.
Yeah, I do too. But I love that the other thing you gave, and probably not a living books sort of, well, it is, but it's a homeschooling in general, is it's so was if you've got to a point with your kids where they're at the level that they can comprehend, and if you go any further, that's going to. We found that with our daughter with some time concepts, and for a week we pushed through, and it was the worst week of all of us, all of our homeschooling lives, and we went,
Yeah.
actually, we're not ready for this concept. Let's give us some time, and we'll come back to it.
Back in New York in the early 1900s, there was a teacher who was worried about the amount of extra subjects that were getting pushed into the curriculum and that kids weren't getting time to play and do all this other stuff. And he said, I think we should leave maths until middle school. And there was a lot of pushback, and he kept trying to do it. And they ended up agreeing to let him try this in some African-American schools only. And so they just played games and stuff instead of doing that. And sure, they were behind on their number facts when they weren't learning them. But from the moment they started doing that in middle school, they caught up and overtook the other kids really quickly because they could wrestle with numbers and play with numbers because they were so used to doing games in the games and everything else that they were playing. And it was real to them. And so they could do those more real life number problems much better than the kids who'd been doing maths all along. But they caught up in no time with the straight out number facts type things as well. And maths, I think, is very much something that when they're ready for it, they can start to understand these things because they're encountering them in real life as opposed to just being this abstract concept.
Yeah, and the amount of maths you can do with some dice and cards is amazing.
Exactly.
And stories. Yeah.
Yep. And that's one thing that we wanted to do. So me being a natural mathematician, I figured most of my kids probably would be too, and they have been, but meant that we didn't have to sit and do 45 minutes of math a day. They get it. That's cool. We can focus on the reading because they're struggling more with that, or we can put the attention into other areas. I went to a really small school. There was 80 kids from kindy to the end of year 10 in my school. So we had kindy 1, 2, and 3 in the same classroom, and then at least 2 years in all the other ones. And because I was ahead in that, the teachers offered to, come and help me, you can come in at lunch and we'll give you advanced math type things. I'm like, but I'm already bored in class. Now I'm just going to have to sit there next year because I've already done the stuff in my lunchtime. I'm not giving up my lunch to sit even more bored next year. So there's no point sometimes in pushing ahead quicker just because they can. Like, let them be kids. If they understand all of the concepts and everything, let's not waste their time.
Yeah, and let them play with it in their own way as well, because they will play with it. Yeah. You've spoken about living books being Charlotte Mason, and you've touched on how you use it anyway with curriculum. But any learning stuff, this can be something that you use.
Yeah, absolutely. So while it came from Charlotte Mason, I would absolutely put myself more in the eclectic homeschooler type of thing. We very much, one thing that drew me to Charlotte Mason is short lessons and not going all day. So a couple of hours, bang, and then the afternoon was free for them to do whatever they wanted to. My oldest son is just an absolute dream to teach. Because his brain is so much like mine, it's easy for me. And I was so excited when his younger brother was going to turn 6. Like, we can read these books together. They're only 17 months apart. This is going to be amazing. 10 minutes in, I'm like, this is not going to work. His brother has different challenges and his verbal comprehension is really, really poor. So we've had to do a lot of work. And I think that's why I believe that everything we use, whether it's a living book, whatever else, is a tool in our homeschool. And you need to know what you're using this tool for. Because just like you'll use a different tool if you've got heaps of a different shovel, if you've got loose soil, if you've got clay and whatever else, you're going to use different things for your kids because they're different. Sometimes you just have to shake it up. And so with Pax, we will choose books with a lot more pictures. So he's very visual. So he has something to try and tie that to. And even if he's only picking up half of what we're reading, if there's a lot of pictures, he's usually be able to tie that in with what's going on a lot more. So yeah, the very first lesson with them is this is not going to work. And we've had to shake it all up. And I became a lot more eclectic then because we're just trying to do what's best for our kids, and our kids are all different, and we are all different. And so you're trying to find the best compromise between what you're able to do and what they need.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
that's one of the really wonderful things about homeschooling. So my youngest is a huge reader as well. So my oldest and youngest are really easy to use living books with. My middle one's a bit more of a challenge, and so we cater his education to what he needs. No matter what you're doing, it's just a tool. So if you're using workbooks a lot in your homeschool and you'd like to do something that'll really make the learning more emotional and help them really grasp a deeper understanding, it's easy to just supplement a great book that is also covering that time period or whatever else, and just read it together to start if you're wanting to look at using living books. And even if each chapter or so you just, hey, what do you think of that? What would you have done in this situation? Use it as a jumping point for discussions. My oldest is reading a book on economics at the moment, and he'll come in. Well, it was great. Yesterday, he was chatting to me because he was reading a book on economics and another one called How to Read a Book, which discusses all the different types of books and how you have to look at what bias the authors have and all this kind of thing. And he's been a bit resistant with that book, but I always explain the purpose of it to him, because he's like me and likes to understand the whys. And he was reading the economics book. He goes, "Oh, Dad, this book has a real conservative bias." I'm like, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Well, they just started talking about how this is bad, but they never explain why it's bad. They never go into anything to back up their statement. They're just trying to tell you that these sorts of concepts are bad ideas without anything." I'm like, "Okay, cool." He's like, "Yeah, because we've been reading about that in How to Read a Book." And you start to find that even totally different things will all start to mesh together, and they'll put it through. And it's really wonderful once you get that all those connections starting to be made.
Yeah, and he didn't even have to write about it or do anything else. He just
Exactly. Thank goodness, because getting him to do writing is there.
and I know a lot of unschoolers who may not use any other part of Charlotte Mason, but story time is huge in their house, and living books is how they do story time. And they're very
It's
intentional about that.
it's a fantastic way of, sneaking those vegetables in with when they're thinking that they're not getting them, when you grind up the cauliflower to put in the pizza crust so they don't really realize that they're getting that extra vegetable.
Oh,
We used to stick a whole pile of books that we wanted the kids to read. We'd have like a special book rack and stick them all out there on the front so they look really appealing. And the kids are like, "Oh, I want to read this one." Like, wow, how did that get there?
and
Yeah,
like you said about the vegetables, but really, if you come back to that, that's how we want to learn as adults. I
exactly.
am much more excited learning if it's interesting, if there's emotional connection, if all of those type of things, than having to just sort through, well, myself anyway, sort through the bang, bang, bang of it and less likely to remember it, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, a Stanford professor, Chip Heath, got his students to come in and give a 1-minute speech on nonviolent crime. And most of the people just talked about statistics. And after 10 minutes or so, only about 10% of what they'd said could be remembered. But there was a couple of students got up and told story for their 1 minute, and 70% could remember what they'd been told through that story. Story is something that was how information has been conveyed since the dawn of time. You look at all the folk tales and the mythologies and everything else. These were stories that people had to explain how to get to the watering holes and wherever else, or how they felt that things came into being, and were passed around for thousands of years around the fire. Story resonates deeply within us, and it's a wonderful way for us to learn.
And you forget that it was funny, you just sparked a memory for me that only just happened this weekend. We were at my nephew's first birthday, and my sister-in-law's father, see someone and they're just a storyteller. Like, I think it's an actual
Yes.
really beautiful gift, and he's a natural one, so he doesn't need and he's my nephew was asking him, "Pa, tell us one of your funny stories." And so for the next 30 minutes, everyone's just sitting there listening to him tell some life stories, some a bit cheeky from when he was younger.
Yep.
But there was so much lessons, so much, yeah, so many lessons happening in there of our kids hearing the choices he made, whether he would have made those
Mm,
again. Him talking about that he has no regrets, even if not all of everything that he did fell the right way. And
yeah.
we don't do that as much as we used to, do we?
We don't, and I think it's because we've got so much technology and we're being bombarded so quickly with so many different things, that art is being lost, and it's a real shame. And I'm sure, did your kid come up running to you to tell you bits about the stories later on or anything like that?
Well, they were so excited about it, and I think they just think every adult has that same storytelling ability. But then it was like
Yep,
we were going around the circle and they wanted to hear stories because it was they were invested in our lives. They were invested in
that's it.
how we were when we were younger or what they were like when what's a funny story about me when I was young, mum? What was something that I had
Hmm.
to learn or do? And it became this really big, beautiful sharing circle that all just started because they wanted to hear a funny story from Pa, and it was half an hour of people trying to think of funny stories that had happened to them, and
It's
they loved
lovely, isn't
it,
it? Yeah. And the stuff
and
that
they
you
learnt
remember that you'd lost touch of. Yeah.
exactly right, and they learnt more about us probably in that time about something that we wouldn't have just spoken about naturally because, as a parent, you always go to, "In my day, I didn't do this and this," instead of sharing
That's it.
those bits and pieces of yourself. And I
Yep.
think that's what the Living Books does beautifully with any topic is shares those bits and pieces of what you're doing.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any hints there, though? Like, if you're starting Living Books and you're so overwhelmed by all the choices and all those things and you just want to tell a good story, you want the kids to sort of get really in there, how do you go about sort of dipping your toes into it?
I always work backwards.
Okay.
So the what am I trying to solve? What is the problem here? What's the end goal? And then I work backwards to find something that will achieve that. So say we're doing history and they're quite bored by just learning the facts and all the stuff about World War One or whatever. I'd try to find a great book about a soldier in World War One. Maybe the Aussie Crusaders is one that I published, following some Aussies as part of the Light Brigade and charging through on their horses and stuff. So they go through
Oh, I hadn't jotted
Palestine and
that down.
Egypt and that kind of thing. And I mean, it's Aussie larrikins, getting up to their hijinks as they are going through it all, but then taking part in this huge battle. And it just sort of helps to make real what was going on at these times. And so I think something like that can be just work backwards from whatever you're trying to achieve. And then you know that you're getting something that'll be in the ballpark.
And do you find that with Living Books or books in general? The good thing about them is you want to talk about World War One and all these amazing movies come to mind, and then you think, no, my 8-year-old is not ready to watch that. Whereas with a book, their imagination can take them as far what a 15-year-old will imagine versus what an 8-year-old would imagine allows them to understand the concept without it taking them too far past where they're ready.
Our imagination needs a point of reference. And I think, yeah, a 5-year-old doesn't have the more graphic points of reference that the 15-year-old has. And so
Yeah.
while they imagine it awful, the awful that they're picturing is nowhere near what the awful a 15-year-old might be picturing if you're talking about a violent battle scene or something like that. It's
Yeah. So
great
it
they
allows the
can
whole
take
family to
what they're
access.
ready for.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is what I've loved about, to be honest, with I loved about the Living Books is that I feel like as we're getting better at doing it, is that we can access a lot of topics that maybe just visually we wouldn't have been able to because I felt that my kids weren't ready to see that.
Yes, absolutely. And they get from it what they're ready to get from it. And
Yeah.
it's not right or wrong if they miss some of the subtext or whatever, that's fine. They're not ready for it yet, and that's okay. They
Yeah.
still getting something. I mean, I know that there's a lot of things that I'm sure I read, and I don't get every single little thing the author was intending, and that's okay as well. Or if you had to do Bruce Dorr in school, he complained that he didn't actually mean half the stuff the English teachers wanted you to say that he meant. So who knows with English?
Totally. Yes. With all of this, is there any other pieces of advice that you would give someone looking into starting Living Books? Also, can you explain what you have on offer and how that can support them and anyone else that you think would be good to sort of read their stuff, look at their website, all of that sort of stuff to get an understanding of how they could use Living Books in their homeschool?
So, an easy way to find suggestions for living books for different subjects is to look at different Charlotte Mason curricula, because they're going to be have it all broken down by subject, year, whatever else, and what books they'd recommend. So that's often a good place to start. I'll I'll give a handout with this if there's some show notes you can do that'll have just some information about living books and how to start using them, as well as links to different places to find some great book lists. Here in Australia, we're lucky to have a lot of wonderful mums who've done a lot of hard work putting book lists together. So I can have links to quite a few of those. And there's also quite a few living libraries in Australia that you can join up to, and they've got huge collections of living books, and they'll send you a bundle, and then you send those back and you can order another bundle. So that can be a great way to get a whole pile of living books that might be difficult to find at a much more affordable price.
Erin Hassett
So
was
that's
actually talking about that at the summit.
wonderful. Erin was
Yeah.
exactly the main one I was thinking of there. She
Yeah.
is absolutely delightful. I will go to her often if I have questions looking for a specific Aussie living book. She's great. So make sure you listen to her. So that's often where I will go if I'm trying to find a book for a certain subject or to fill a certain hole. There's people that have made secular Charlotte Mason curricula. There's some Catholic Charlotte Mason curricula, Muslim. So there's been a lot of different, while she was initially Christian, there's been a lot of other people that have taken and built on what she was wanting to do. Sorry, and I'm sure there was other parts to that question, but
No, that was beautiful. And what do you offer? So how do people find you? All that sort of stuff.
So I'm Living Book Press, just livingbookpress.com. And I try to republish as many of these living books as I can to make them easily accessible and affordable for people. I'm currently going through my website, adding more sort options. So you'll be able to sort by target, like the age range for reading it themselves, as well as if you're looking for something in a certain time period or a certain geographic location. So you'll be able to find things like that. I think I've got about 400 books on my site at the moment, and that's growing all the time.
And that's a massive undertaking. I totally understand because I'm doing it the same with my workshops. So be patient because to sort all those things means you are individually adding information to each book. You also have, I know I bought it and that's how we dabbled, is that you have for people that are worried about cost or just getting idea, you have a digital that you can buy some digital books as well. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that still?
I try to make life as easy as possible for people by offering as many different options. So my books, as many as I can, I also offer in a digital format. Most or almost all are available in PDF if I can do that. And I've got someone going through at the moment, creating EPUBs of them all just to make it a bit easier for people on smaller devices to have it reflowable. If there's a lot of images, I'm not sure what I'll do just because the layout is important sometimes, and that doesn't always work when you convert to an EPUB. And each December, I offer a big digital bundle with like over 95% off with all of the digital books that I can offer. There's some that I don't have digital rights for, so obviously I can't include those. And there's others that I pay the rights holder per digital copy I sell, so I can't include those as well in the big bundle. But 95% of my books are in there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony. I think what you've offered is amazing. Great understanding of living books, but also what your business is allowing Australians and people around the world, because you supplied it a lot of people in America and stuff, is just allowing us to access stuff that probably would have been forgotten or lost. So isn't that just the whole idea of living books, really?
I love it. It's a lot of fun. And I'm lucky to have so many people who suggest wonderful books that I would have had no way of even knowing about that I've come to love.
Yeah. So reach out with Anthony. He's on, obviously you can email him. He's been slowly putting up ideas on Insta and socials for you to follow and thoughts and recommendations. So if you're really overwhelmed by that, start there, have a look there, and hopefully you can introduce a bit of living books into your curriculum.
If there's something specific you're after, feel free to send me an email. And if I can help, I will. And if I can't, I will be able to point you in a direction of others who can. So
He's in the know.
That's it. Exactly. We're all just trying to get through this homeschooling journey together. So if I can help in any way, I'll do my best.
Thank you so much for joining us, Anthony.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that chat as much as I did. Remember, it's simple. You find good literature, tells a story, and gives information, which is not really hard to do these days. And your kids learn. We're always thinking about, and a lot of the homeschooling parents talk about this, input instead of output when homeschooling. We're so lucky that we don't really have to test our kids all the time. So using living books is a fun and interesting way to get a lot of input in. If you would like to check out Anthony, go check him out at Living Book Press. He has a fantastic amount of resources. And I've also got a link to some other resources that you can use to learn about living books, find living books, and some of my favorites that we're using at the moment. If you would like to hear more from Anthony, you can also jump into the Fearless membership. He has been doing summit workshops for us for years, and it really helps you to understand how you can implement living books with different suggestions for different subjects. If you haven't heard more about the Do It Yourself Curriculum Summit, follow me on Fearless and get ready for it, because if you're feeling like a box curriculum isn't the way to go, you're probably right, and we're going to show you how numerous different homeschoolers have put together their own curriculum over the years. Hope to see you there, and happy homeschooling.
Thanks for joining us on the Fearless Homeschool podcast. If you'd like to stay connected in between episodes, check us out on socials at Fearless Homeschool. And if you'd like to hear more about our Fearless Homeschool journey, sign up to our Fearless Family Fables newsletter. But don't forget to subscribe so that you're the first to know when a new episode drops. Because
Why do it alone?